Hi guys, so welcome to a new video. Today I'm going to be discussing the news today regarding Boohoo and its independent review into the modern slavery allegations earlier this year. Obviously it was responded to quite well by investors this morning. The stock increased about 20%. It closed around 9% up at the end of the day, so retraced slightly, but still a good day for Boohoo investors. So having read, the majority of the review, I can say that there are some positive aspects, but also some negatives. Now, starting here in Chapter 8 with the discussions and analysis, it starts here with Levitt saying that the Boohoo board treats every piece of negative publicity about the Leicester garment industry as the first time they'd ever heard it. Obviously, that's surprising. That means they're not responding to the situation. They're not seeing these allegations that have been around for years, at least 3 years, even more than that though, 5, 6 years, these allegations that the Leicester garment industry is not ethical, that it's doing illegal things, and there was no concern for that within the board. Now that's a worrying admission there for me, and I think there's some problems here. It says Boohoo simply had no idea where the clothes were being made and no chance of monitoring the conditions of the workers who made them. That's an admission for me of huge managerial negligence. Not only did the senior management and the board not know where the clothes were being made, but they also didn't care. And that's really concerning. Say here, they didn't know and didn't really care. The order should be delivered on time, of acceptable quality, and at a price that enabled them to have their margin. They didn't care about the rest of it. Didn't know where they were being made or packed. I mean, the example given here is about actually them using a factory in Leicester, but a factory that couldn't produce the clothes themselves. They had to outsource it. And they outsourced it to a factory in Morocco. And Boohoo had absolutely no idea that those clothes were being made in Morocco, shipped to Leicester, packaged in Leicester, and then sent to them. No clue. The management, the board, had no idea where those clothes were being made. That is concerning to me. That's a complete lack of understanding for their own supply chain and a complete lack of care for it. Also, you've got here that the board was really defensive about the minimum wage claims, that there was no proof, despite the fact that their own auditors found proof, despite the extensive investigations from journalists, whether they can be trusted or not. I mean, it's fair to say that there was enough for them to admit that it was happening. But no, even when their own audit occurred, they still said there was no proof. I mean, that's really concerning. That's just shutting their eyes and refusing to acknowledge the situation. You've also got, instead of focusing on the main article when the news first broke, they've focused on disproving minor elements. Really, again, a really defensive play here, almost like they knew what was going on. They couldn't refute that, but they could refute elements of the story. And I just don't think that's a good look. Looking at this story from this point of view, they just look defensive, they look argumentative, like they don't want to admit that there was a fault here, but they knew there was. One of the recommendations that Levitt makes here is that its primary objective should be to eradicate subcontracting. I mean, I think while that might not have a major impact on Boohoo, it could. By removing subcontracting, that might lead to much higher costs. Now, the reason I say that is their business model works by them outsourcing it, and the other company does all the work. If they can't produce it in-house, they find someone else to produce it, and that goes down the chain for different subcontractors. If they can't do that, then they have to do that all themselves. That's more money, more time, and could eat into their margin. Now, that might not be true. Analysts from JPM this week on Wednesday said that they expected this to enable Boohoo to really produce cheaper by offshoring it. It turns out that some of their clothes were being made offshore anyway without them knowing, so who knows whether that would actually result in much cheaper prices. It's also mentioned here that Boohoo has something in the region of 500 companies in its Leicester supply chain alone. Now, the fact that there's no concrete number here, that they weren't 100% sure on the number of companies in their own supply chain, is concerning to me. Again, it shows a complete lack of knowledge of their business. Really an admission of managerial negligence. I just don't see that as good enough from the management of a publicly traded company. They don't know how many suppliers just in Leicester they have, let alone elsewhere. Especially when it's an industry known for having problems. In Leicester specifically, you would have thought they'd be on top of that. They'd concentrate on it, but apparently not. There's also comments here about the insufficient scrutiny for the compliance team. That the co-CEO, when they gave evidence, did not give an accurate representation of Boohoo's compliance functions, though we think that she may not have realised that until some time later. So again, a complete lack of understanding of the business. She testifies, she gives evidence, but she didn't know how their own compliance functions worked. Fine, she wasn't lying, but she wasn't lying because she didn't understand how the business that she runs works. Now that's concerning, again, really for me as an investor. I wouldn't want to go anywhere near that kind of lack of understanding. Again, here, when they did understand, probably around December 2019, that things were bad in Leicester, they didn't move fast enough. They did try and make changes, but they were slow. They were really focusing still on growth and profit, and that seems to be the primary driver for all the management and the board. They just care about their profits and the growth, which is good, but also not what a publicly traded company is supposed to do. They need to look at these kind of things, because not only are you as management exposed, but also public shareholders are exposed. In this particular case, there was a massive fall in the share price because of this modern slavery story. Now, whether that was overblown or not, it doesn't matter, it happened. So if you'd sold after that, you would have been about 50% down on your position. Building on that, Levitt also says that they didn't seem concerned at all that that shareholders were affected by this, that no member of the board saw any responsibility to shareholders for the supply chain issues. Again, problematic. Obviously shareholder primacy isn't supposed to be the complete focus of all companies these days, but they should be considering shareholders. They're a publicly traded company. But it doesn't seem like that. I think throughout this whole analysis, throughout the whole review, you really get the sense that this is run as a family business, not as a publicly traded company. That's why they don't have proper compliance systems. That's why there seems to be little corporate governance, if any at all. Here it says, I've concluded that what is needed is a realignment of the board's priorities, to recognise that running a great public company is not simply about profit. Again, just that focus on profit has damaged shareholders, and it has damaged the company's reputation, even only a little bit, although it's difficult to know that until the results on the 30th, but we'll find out. And even on the 30th, it doesn't show long-term damage, but anyway. So the document then goes on to discuss the other allegations from journalists that there were executives connected to some of these factories through ownerships. Here it says that they didn't have time to investigate this with any rigour, but they've said it's unlikely to be the case. Now, I'm not sure how you can say that while also saying you haven't investigated it, but there we go. There's some logic in there somewhere, I suppose. I think, again, you see here that, Mahmoud Karmani here, senior position, sell clothes, leaves it to other people to deal with the other aspects of the company. Now, that's problematic. I believe he's the chairman. As a chairman, he shouldn't be just focusing on selling clothes. He needs to be focused in all elements of the business. His priorities have been allowed to dictate company policy for too long. Again, running as a family business despite the public investors. There's also comments here about a lack of participation in the review, despite the fact that it was an independent review paid for and initiated by Boohoo. Partway through, she notes that the board refused to send over emails, despite the fact that that was within scope of the investigation. And the argument they gave was insufficient, so we say. I mean, she herself says it's the very essence of an independent review that I decide what I need to see, not Boohoo. I think that's pretty scathing. They refused to hand it over. What's in those emails that they didn't want Levitt to see? What's so important that she couldn't see that? Despite them saying at the beginning they'd fully cooperate, they wanted to do this investigation, they started this investigation. When it came down to it, they didn't. They didn't participate. I think that's really concerning. If we move down to chapter 9, the conclusions, there's a lot of interesting stuff here, but we'll gloss over most of it because it's what's in the body. But I do encourage you to read these conclusions and the analysis yourself, obviously to form your own opinions. If we go to, I have some concerns that on occasion the board found it difficult to stand up to the current chairman and to ensure that the best interests of all shareholders are acted upon. Well, I'm sorry. The board found it difficult to do their job as a board, to act in the interest of all shareholders. That's not the point of a board. Again, I think a problematic statement, something that needs to be changed. Now, Boohoo has obviously made a response to this review to implement some of the changes that Levitt recommends, but there is nothing that I saw in Boohoo's statement that references this particular element, that the chairman has too much control and is not opposed enough, and that the company doesn't act in the best interest of all shareholders. And that concerns me. They should be fixing that, and quickly, because they're a publicly traded company. I don't know how many times I've said that, but they are a publicly traded company. They need to act in the best interests of their shareholders, not the chairman. Beyond that, it says here that the allegations have been around since 2017, and they didn't look into it properly. They knew in March 2019 at the latest. The board knew by December at the latest, and they acted, but not urgently. Okay, so, that's mixed. They did take steps, but they just weren't urgent about it because they didn't see it as their problem. But again, that to me looks like they didn't fully take steps until it was a news story that decimated the share price of the company. And that's a pretty bad look. There is further points on that they were slowly implementing change, but when it comes to this kind of very widespread endemic problems, they need to act a lot quicker. If you go on here, there's more talk, more specific relating to the coronavirus pandemic. The Director of Sustainability announced that the compliance team, that the decision whether or not to pause manufacturing was for the product team to make, not the compliance team, or at the board level. Again, really concerning. There are absolutely no board minutes that reflect a discussion about pausing manufacturing, despite the coronavirus pandemic. That's concerning. Again, no governance, no oversight, no concern for the supply chain. Obviously, there are positive conclusions here as well. I do not accept that Boohoo's business model is founded on exploiting workers in Leicester. Now, that is one of the headlines that have come up, along with several of these points, just to show that they're not culpable. And I agree. I don't think their business model is founded on exploiting workers in Leicester. However, it's founded on not giving a damn on who's producing the clothes. It's founded on a total lack of care for supply chains, for where the clothes are being made, for who's even making them. I find that kind of "it's not our problem" argument very unconvincing, very concerning in a publicly traded company. A company that is supposed to be a high growth, really, impressive company that has this complete lack of oversight. Now that to me spells disaster in the long run. There are a few more conclusions here, but I'll leave that for you to read yourself if you're interested. At this point, it's difficult to say what's going to happen. My previous take on the company, which you can see in one of my other videos, could be wrong. We won't know really until the 30th of September when the results are published. And they could have not been hurt by this at all. But this document, for me, this review, enforces my opinion that this company is not investable as a long-term investor looking for value, looking for good, dependable companies. Yes, they're profitable. Yes, they're a high-growth company. But there's no corporate governance. There's no concern for shareholders. And that's why I could never invest in Boohoo. Yes, people have made money off the stock, and they will continue to do so probably. JP Morgan's target is now at $4.15. It'll probably get there. But it doesn't make it a good investment. It doesn't make it a sound investment. Anyway, that's just my 2 cents on the situation at Boohoo. As always, this is not financial advice. Please do your own research from your own opinions. I'm not a financial advisor. And thank you very much for listening through this relatively long video. Please subscribe, watch my other videos, and drop a like if you enjoyed the video. Thank you very much.